The Other Mother. This story is an emotional drama about love, betrayal, and the limits of self-sacrifice. Two sisters, Amelia and Charlotte, were inseparable since childhood, but when one becomes a surrogate mother for the other, their world begins to crack. What started as an act of unconditional love turns into a battle for the child, with both women believing they are the true mother. In the silence of the nursery, the most painful question echoes: whose heart does a mother's love truly belong to? The silence in the nursery was a thick, suffocating thing, heavier than the August air that drifted through the open window. It was a room painted in the gentle yellow of morning sunshine, filled with plush toys and the sweet, clean scent of a newborn. But now it was a battlefield. Amelia stood by the door, her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. In the rocking chair, her sister, Charlotte, cradled the tiny, sleeping bundle that was supposed to be Amelia's daughter. Charlotte wasn't looking at her. She was looking at the baby, her face a mask of fierce, unyielding possession. The love that had once been the bedrock of their lives had evaporated, leaving behind this cold, terrifying chasm. "Charlie, please," Amelia whispered, the name that had once been an endearment, now feeling foreign and sharp on her tongue. "Please, just let me hold my daughter." Charlotte's head lifted slowly, and her eyes, the same warm brown as Amelia's, were glacial. "No," she said, her voice quiet but absolute. "You can't. She's not yours." It had all started with love, an overwhelming, all-consuming love that had defined the bond between Amelia and Charlotte Hale since childhood. They were two sides of the same coin. Amelia, the planner, the steady one, with a career in architecture and a life mapped out with meticulous precision, and Charlotte, the free spirit, the artist, who moved through life guided by impulse and emotion. Their lives were interwoven, a tapestry of shared secrets, inside jokes, and unwavering support. When Amelia married the love of her life, Mark, it was Charlotte who stood beside her, her laughter echoing in the church. And when, 2 years later, a grim-faced doctor delivered the devastating verdict, Mayer-Rokitansky-Kusterhauser syndrome, a congenital condition that meant Amelia had been born without a uterus, it was Charlotte who held her as she wept, her own tears soaking the collar of Amelia's shirt. The diagnosis shattered Amelia's perfectly constructed world. The dream of motherhood, a dream she had cherished since she was a little girl arranging her dolls in a makeshift cot, was ripped away. Adoption was an option, they were told, but the waiting lists were years long, the process invasive and uncertain. Mark, ever the pragmatist, was gentle but heartbroken. He would love her no matter what, he said, but the ghost of the child they would never have haunted their quiet home. It was during a particularly bleak evening, with Amelia staring blankly at a television commercial filled with laughing babies, that Charlotte had first voiced the idea. "I could do it," she'd said, her voice barely a whisper. Amelia had turned to her, her expression uncomprehending. "Do what?" "For you," Charlotte had continued, her eyes shining with earnest love. "I could carry the baby for you. Be your surrogate." The suggestion hung in the air, audacious and terrifying and beautiful all at once. They researched it voraciously. Since Amelia had no uterus but perfectly healthy ovaries, they could use her egg and Mark's sperm. It would be a gestational surrogacy. The child would be biologically theirs in every way. Charlotte would simply be the vessel, the incredible, selfless incubator for their dreams. It seemed perfect, a miraculous solution born from sisterly love. Amelia's hope, so long dormant, ignited like a wildfire. There were legal papers, of course. A contract was drawn up by a specialist lawyer, a dry, clinical document that felt almost insulting to their bond. It stipulated Charlotte's rights and responsibilities, the compensation for medical expenses and lost wages, and, most crucially, the clause stating she would relinquish all parental rights immediately upon the birth. They both signed it without a second thought, laughing as the pen scratched across the paper. It was just a formality. They were sisters. They had trust. The pregnancy was a time of unparalleled closeness. Charlotte moved into Amelia and Mark's spare room during the second trimester. Amelia catered to her every whim, preparing elaborate meals to satisfy her cravings, massaging her swollen feet, reading to her belly every night. They would lie on the couch together, Amelia's hand resting on Charlotte's swelling abdomen, feeling the flutter of kicks that sent waves of euphoric joy through them both. "She's a feisty one," Amelia would laugh. "She gets that from you." And Charlotte would smile, a soft, serene expression on her face, and reply, "No, she gets it from her mother." It was only in retrospect that Amelia could see the hairline fractures beginning to form. There was the time at the baby shower when their aunt innocently remarked, "Oh, Charlotte, you're a natural. You look just like a real mom." A fleeting, unreadable expression had crossed Charlotte's face before she smiled it away. Or the day they were assembling the crib, and Charlotte had run her hand over the smooth, white wood, her touch lingering, possessive. "I was thinking," she'd said quietly, "maybe we should put it in my room for the first few weeks, just to make the night feeds easier." Amelia, caught up in her own excitement, had gently dismissed it. "Don't be silly, Charlie. You'll need your rest to recover. Mark and I will handle all of that." She hadn't noticed the flicker of resentment in her sister's eyes. She had been so blinded by her own yearning. She had failed to see the bond that was forming was not just between the baby and its intended parents, but between the baby and the woman whose body was its entire world. The birth was difficult, a long and arduous 26 hours that left Charlotte exhausted but exhilarated. When the baby, a beautiful girl with a fuzz of dark hair and Amelia's own deep blue eyes, was finally placed in Charlotte's arms, something shifted in the room. The air grew heavy. The triumphant, shared joy Amelia had anticipated never arrived. She and Mark stood back, their own arms aching with emptiness, as Charlotte stared down at the newborn, a fierce, primal love transforming her features. The nurses, unaware of the arrangement, cooed and congratulated the new mother. "What have you named her?" one asked kindly. Before Amelia could speak, Charlotte answered, her voice clear and strong. "Her name is Willow." Amelia's blood ran cold. Willow was a name they had never discussed. The name they had chosen, after Amelia's grandmother, was Eleanor. "Charlie," Mark began gently, stepping forward. "What are you talking about?" "Her name is Eleanor." Charlotte didn't look up. "No," she repeated, her voice a low murmur. "Her name is Willow, and she's staying with me." That was the moment their world imploded. The days that followed were a blur of disbelief, then pleading, then raw, guttural rage. The battleground shifted from the hospital to their family home, the nursery now a symbol of their fractured love. The arguments were volcanic, filled with words like poisoned arrows, designed to inflict the deepest possible wounds. "How can you do this?" Amelia had screamed during one terrible fight, tears streaming down her face. "She is my daughter. My egg, my husband's child. You were just helping." "Helping?" Charlotte had shot back, her face pale with fury as she clutched the baby protectively. "I grew her inside me for 9 months. I felt her move. I felt her hiccup. I went through agony to bring her into this world. You have no idea what that's like. You bought a crib and painted a room. She is a part of me. You can't just take her away." The legal contract, once a forgotten formality, became their weapon. Amelia and Mark sued for custody, initiating a legal battle that was as brutal as it was public. The story was leaked to the local press, and suddenly their private agony was fodder for gossip and judgment. They were the warring sisters, their faces splashed across newspapers. In the small town where everyone knew everyone, there was no escape. Amelia was painted as a cold, sterile career woman trying to steal a baby from her loving, maternal sister. Charlotte was seen as a hero by some, a manipulative monster by others. The schism ripped through their family with surgical precision. Their parents, caught in an impossible situation, tried to remain neutral, a position that felt like a betrayal to both daughters. "Can't you just work this out?" their mother would plead, her voice thin with stress. But there was nothing to work out. It was a zero-sum game. One sister would win, the other would lose everything. Their aunts, uncles, and cousins were forced to choose sides. Invitations to family gatherings stopped. Phone calls became stilted and awkward, then ceased altogether. The warm, sprawling family that had been their anchor was now a collection of estranged individuals, shattered by the conflict. The courtroom was a sterile, impersonal hell. Their deepest secrets and most vulnerable moments were dissected under the cold, fluorescent lights. Amelia's medical history was laid bare. Charlotte's emotional state during the pregnancy was questioned, her journal entries read aloud as evidence of her growing, obsessive attachment. Lawyers used their love against them. Amelia's gratitude was reframed as manipulation. Charlotte's initial selflessness was twisted into a premeditated plot. They sat on opposite sides of the room, separated by a gulf of lawyers and hatred, refusing to even look at each other. The sister who had once known all her secrets was now a stranger, a despised adversary. The judge's decision came on a gray, rain-lashed Tuesday. The gestational surrogacy contract was legally binding. Charlotte had signed away her parental rights. Custody was awarded to Amelia and Mark. A choked sob escaped Charlotte's lips, a sound of such profound despair that it seemed to physically wound Amelia. There was no triumph, no victory, just a vast, hollow emptiness. The transfer was to happen the next day. Amelia and Mark arrived at the house with a police officer, a precaution insisted upon by their lawyer. The house was silent. Charlotte was in the nursery, packing a small bag with baby clothes. She didn't look at them. She moved like an automaton, her face a blank, emotionless mask. When she was done, she walked over to the crib where Willow, Eleanor, was sleeping. She stood there for a long moment, her back to them, her shoulders shaking. Then, with a final, shuddering breath, she turned and walked out of the room, out of the house, and out of their lives. Amelia walked slowly towards the crib. There she was, her daughter, the baby she had yearned for, fought for, and destroyed her family for. She reached down and carefully lifted the warm, sleeping child into her arms. The baby stirred, her tiny mouth making sucking motions in her sleep. Amelia held her close, breathing in her scent, and looked around the beautiful yellow room. It was a perfect picture of a dream come true. But as she stood there, clutching her daughter to her chest, the only thing she could feel was the deafening silence, the ghost of her sister's love, and the profound, aching weight of all she had lost.